The house was small and squat and sturdy, partially hidden by a massive Leylandii hedge which pressed against the whitewashed bars of the window downstairs. Apart from the satellite dish and the burglar alarm, it looked like it hadn't changed much for several hundred years. At some point in Queen Victoria's reign, it had become the post office. And I suspected this was probably still regarded as recent history in the village. One street, one town. That was the return address on the small red card I held in my hand, so I knew I was at the right place. A rusty GPO sign croaked above my head, and I had to stop to avoid it as I entered. After a second's hesitation, and a bit to my own surprise, I was able to stand up and look around. The whole downstairs of the house was one large living area, very, very old, with the heavily overgrown window at the front making everything green and slightly murky. It was like being in a fish tank. On the far wall were hundreds and hundreds of shelves, each with their own nameplate, written in tiny, perfect writing, and on each of these individual shelves were individual tottering piles of envelopes. In the middle of the room was a table, as ancient and wooden as the beams in the roof, covered again in letters of every conceivable size and shape and color. And moving around this table, gently mumbling and occasionally laughing, were a very kind-looking, very elderly-looking, very tired-looking couple. The man was tall, and as stooped as I had been coming through the door. The woman was short, very plump, and had an apron that bulged with red elastic bands. I cleared my throat, and they both reacted so comically, throwing letters in the air and crying, "Oh my!" that instantly I warmed to them. "I am here to pick up my mail," I said, and held out the "while you were out" card for them to examine. The man peered through his delicate, spindly spectacles and looked at the name on the card. "Ah, you must have been out when we called," he said, and then smiled a little. "That's quite unusual. Most of our customers don't go out much." His wife was already standing on a movable stepladder in the section, looking for my name on the shelves. "There's only the one for you," she said, coming back after a moment with a long, pastel-shaded envelope. "Sometimes people have got hundreds. You are clearly new to this." I took the envelope from her, and looked at the return address, which was written in purple ink. It was someone I hadn't heard from in years, but the sight of her name still made me smile. But I hadn't really taken in what the old woman had just said, so I tried to refocus. "Tell me, what do you actually do here?" The man was now under a big pile of boxes, some with very old Christmas paper clinging to them. I'd noticed the crowded shelf saying, "Forward, to S. Claus," when I first came in, and it took a second for his nose and spectacles to peep out from under them. "Oh, we're a post office for the lonely," he said. I stood there, not knowing what to say, and just sort of flapped. "Oh, don't worry, dear," hushed his wife, laying a comforting arm on mine. "It happens to the best of us." "Yes. There's no need to be embarrassed," said the man cheerily, from behind the presents. I started to stammer, and handled the letter in my hand nervously. "I am not," I started. "I mean, I don't feel, I just wasn't sure what you meant." "It's perfectly simple," explained the man. "Whenever letters are written to lonely people throughout the world, or those who live in fear or distress, they come through this post office first before going to their final destination. You are lucky you can see us in person, we're usually a lot busier than this." "Maybe you've been a bit down recently," added his wife, with a helpful smile. "Or at a loose end?" I was now looking at the section myself, and I could see my name, with fresh new ink, blazing out from a little 3x1 strip of card. "Isn't there any way my name can be removed?" I asked. "And I can be dealt with by a normal post office?" The man whistled. "Well, there's only two ways people's names are taken off these shelves. Usually, they meet someone, a new friend, and both names suddenly come away from their shelving, and flitter up into the sky. It's beautiful, isn't it, dear?" "Oh yes," agreed his wife. "One moment they're all dry and covered in yellow sellotape, the next they're soaring together like butterflies, there's a little pop, and we never see them again. It's the best part of the job." "And the second way names are removed?" I asked. The man frowned. "They just go. On their own. No one really notices." I was now looking at other shelves, dark, and dusty and neglected. And what about the empty ones, the old names with no mail? Do they ever get filled? The woman's voice was beside me, again. We try, she said. We really do. Once or twice a year, we try and send out at least one piece of mail to everyone, no matter who they are. But it's difficult, continued her husband. I am not good with words, and there are 70 million lonely people to write to in Europe alone. So a lot of the time, we just take adverts we find free in magazines, you know, for credit cards or bank loans, and send them off to people in an envelope, shrugged the old woman. And nowadays, there's email, too. And empty, fly-blown Facebook accounts. We try and contact them all. But a lot of the time, we run out of words after the first 20,000 messages, and despite our best intentions, a lot of the later ones are little more than gibberish about Nigerian bank loans or buying Viagra. I blinked at him. You mean you're responsible for the world's spam email? I said, astonished. It was now the old man's turn to blink. Why? Don't people enjoy it? As if to illustrate their practices, the old lady had started lugging a barrow load of pre-approved debit cards from the back of the post office to the largest shelf I'd spotted so far, one marked, Theo C. Cupire, in large golden letters. And with a weary sigh, the old man started to sort them out into different countries. I took this as my sign to leave. Pausing only to look one final time at my own personal shelf, I thanked the elderly couple for their time and made my way out of the low door, back into the garden again. Walking home, across the village green, I kept looking at the return address on the envelope. Sarah, I thought, I wonder why she's writing to me. And maybe it was my imagination, but I swear just then out of the corner of my eye, back towards the post office, I saw two tiny scraps of paper, one with new ink on it, and the other pastel with purple lettering, flutter upwards like butterflies, and then pop and disappear into the morning air.